travel season in the Western Hemisphere, when many people jet off to explore new destinations at home and abroad. But many disabled travellers say they're being left behind. They often face physical barriers, but point to attitudinal barriers as well, being treated differently and not getting access to the same opportunities as their able-bodied peers.
An oasis tucked away from the chaos of the city, where visitors can lose themselves in the sights, sounds and smells of summer. New York Botanical Garden offers a breath of fresh air for Annie Lachman.
Oh, God, this is good.
The rose garden is your favorite?
Yeah.
Annie was born with cerebral palsy. Navigating New York City in her wheelchair is a daily challenge. For the past 5 years, her family have been documenting their visits to the city's most popular spots. But her sister Lakshmi says mapping out their route, where they will eat and what facilities are available takes meticulous planning.
I'd like to see the whole city being fully accessible. I'd like to see every organization within travel and tourism being trained on how to welcome people with disabilities.
Leaning on Annie's experiences and struggling with her own invisible disabilities, including chronic pain, Lakshmi now dedicates her time to lobbying and educating stakeholders in the travel industry.
Long-term planning is to think of people with disabilities as people first, as part of our community, and as people who needs to be welcomed out to enjoy all of travel and tourism.
Advocates say real change in the tourism industry starts in the sky. Without accessible flights and airports, many people with access needs are grounded.
When we think about travel, it could be cost prohibitive to travel. It could be the physical experience of getting to the airport, trying to find transport for that. It could be even getting onto the plane, figuring out what to do if you use mobility devices, a lot of things like that.
America's airlines are responsible for losing or damaging thousands of wheelchairs and mobility scooters every year, leaving those who rely on them stranded or at risk of serious injury. Sadly, passengers have even died as a result. New legislation proposed earlier this year aims to change that.
We must also crack down on carriers that have gone away with predatory practices that treat customers like suckers and view passengers with disabilities as disposable.
The travel industry across the United States has steadily been recovering since the COVID-19 pandemic. But data from the Department of Transport shows that as passenger numbers have risen, there's been a higher proportion of complaints from flyers with disabilities.
Officials from the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, which oversees transport infrastructure in the region, says they're going above and beyond their legal obligations.
I would love to see everybody have the ability to travel and travel comfortably in a way that they are able to feel able to be as independent as they want to be, but receive the services that they need to be able to successfully make a trip.
At this brand new terminal, a river-themed sensory room is designed to provide a calm haven for people susceptible to sensory overload. Adult changing tables allow people to use the bathroom with dignity. The Port Authority plans to roll them out across more of its airports in the coming years. And for those travelling with service animals, there are brand new facilities to make sure they're comfortable too. And it's not just modern air travel being upgraded. The Intrepid Museum, housed in a vast aircraft carrier off the coast of Manhattan, is one of several institutions responding to the challenge.
Accessible programming at museums like this allows tourists and locals alike to immerse themselves in American history, breaking down barriers to some of New York City's most popular cultural spaces.
Regular training sessions mean staff here are all on board and up to speed with how to be as inclusive as possible. Director of Access Initiatives, Charlotte Martin, tells me the museum is working hard to ensure it caters for people of all ages with a range of disabilities.
When Intrepid was constructed in the early 1940s, accessibility was not the priority. It was not any sort of priority. But we are now a museum. We're a place that welcomes the public. We're a place of public accommodation. And so we need to make sure that we're actually serving that whole public.
The vessel regularly lays down its gangway early for quiet opening hours and stays open late for sensory-friendly evenings. Plus, ramps and lifts mean all visitors can have an elevated experience. And on Broadway, theatres have been rehearsing ways to welcome disabled audiences for several years.
You want to make people with disabilities feel welcome to any performance at any time. And you can't replace Broadway. There's nothing like it. We create a welcoming, judgment-free environment.
Autism-friendly performances are one of the Theatre Development Fund's most popular offerings, bringing the house down every time. Exploring the city is hungry work. Peruvian restaurant Contento was built with accessibility in mind, after co-owner George Gallego became fed up with how he was treated at other venues.
They may come to the table, they'll ask everyone for their orders, they never look directly at me. They ask the person that I'm with that doesn't have a disability, what is it that this person next to you would like to have for dinner, right? Or what would he like to drink? As if, I'm not able to answer these questions myself.
The team here is determined to serve up something better for guests. The bar is at 2 different levels, so wheelchairs can roll up to it comfortably, and the tables are higher than average to allow for space underneath. Braille and large print menus are on offer, as well as accessible cutlery, alternative glassware, and straws.
We've had some people, wheelchair users coming from Europe, I think, from Quebec, that came just to this little section of East Harlem, all the way up here just to witness, see what we're doing and experience it for themselves.
As visitor numbers to the US continue to inch back up after disruptions caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, campaigners stress accessible travel is a lucrative market. And with the right changes, people of all abilities will be able to get a taste of everything New York has to offer.
Here in Europe, the summer holidays are approaching when millions of Europeans travel around the continent to the coasts, countryside and on city breaks. Some popular destinations still struggle to accommodate people with a disability, though there are tourist sites which are making strides to facilitate better accessibility.
Perched on a hill in northern Paris, the impressive site of the Sacré-Cœur Basilica, one of the must-see destinations for tourists in the French capital. But it's tough work for walkers, with hundreds of steps cascading down the sides of the hill. There is a cable railway for those who are unable to take the stairs, but it stops before the top. That means people who use a wheelchair then have to take a winding, cobbled road to get to the basilica.
Mesdames et messieurs, prochain arrêt Notre-Dame dans 10 minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, next stop Notre-Dame in 10 minutes.
With the onset of the busy summer season, tourists are flocking to France. In July and August, the waters of the River Seine are busy with pleasure cruises. Visitors can get on and off the boats at regular stops. But disabled tourists can't use every quay. They are forced to disembark at one of the few pontoons that are accessible via ramps.
Pour les handicapés, on a des escales dédiées pour les personnes à mobilité réduite. On a 3 escales, l'escale de Tour Eiffel, Invalides et l'escale du Louvre. Aussi, à chaque monument, on présente les monuments pour les personnes malvoyantes, pour leur indiquer le prochain arrêt, pour qu'elles puissent se diriger dans le quartier qu'elles souhaitent.
Alain says there are conversations happening between companies and the city authorities focused on initiatives to make river travel more accessible.
Les discussions se font avec la mairie de Paris et le port pour essayer d'avoir une accessibilité un peu plus grande, un peu plus vaste sur nos escales, mais sans discussion pour l'instant, parce que c'est des vieux monuments, les berges ne sont pas toutes adaptées non plus, c'est pas facile à créer et à mettre en norme. Voilà.
Paris is packed with some of the world's most famous landmarks. The Eiffel Tower does have lifts to the top. However, the viewing deck is not accessible for people with reduced mobility. Each summer, thousands of tourists hop on and off the metro. but the city's subway system is notorious for its numerous staircases with escalators few and far between. The layout is problematic for someone with reduced mobility to navigate. Change is happening though. The newest subway line has step-free access and future lines are being equipped with lifts to the platforms. The Paris Metro Authority says just 32 stations out of more than 300 will be accessible by next year when the 2024 Olympic and Paralympic Games are held in the French capital. The organisers say they want to create an experience that everyone can enjoy, with all sporting venues fitted with seating that is adapted for people with disabilities.
Earlier this year, the French president pledged $1.5 billion to improve the accessibility at public places for people with a disability after criticism of a lack of progress on the issue. And there are projects underway elsewhere in Europe to try to provide better access at major tourist sites.
Italy fascinates travellers with its artistic, architectural and archaeological heritage, as well as its mountains, volcanoes, islands and beaches. The country's travel industry was worth $110 billion, or 6.2% of Italian output, in 2019 before the coronavirus pandemic ravaged the sector. Now the tourists are back, along with improvements in access. The Colosseum in Rome has seen gladiators and now it has glass elevators.
L'ascensore consente di raggiungere la galleria intermedia, che è un luogo poco conosciuto ai più al nostro pubblico, e quindi rendiamo accessibile e apriamo alla conoscenza di tutti questo luogo che consentiva in passato a smistare gli spettatori dell'anfiteatro tra l'ingresso al pubblico fino alle gradinate più alte dell'anfiteatro.
Authorities in the Italian capital installed a new lift to allow greater freedom for people with less mobility to explore the ancient amphitheatre.
Attualmente anche i sotterranei sono accessibili perché abbiamo inaugurato nel 2021, quindi appena 2 anni fa, una passerella che consente anche alle persone disabili di poter usufruire della visita dei sotterranei. Questo è un altro tassello che si inserisce in questo grande progetto dedicato all'accessibilità, cioè il Colosseo per tutti.
There are many continuing challenges for accessible tourism in Europe, but there are also positive stories showing that change is slowly happening. For France in particular, those issues will come into even greater focus next year when the 2024 Paralympics come to the French capital.
Singapore, with its clean streets and shiny attractions, is one of Asia's most visited cities. Over 4 million travellers pass through these doors each month, and among them are thousands of visitors with disabilities. But just how accessible is the country to this group?
Alistair Ong is no stranger to the airport. He travels frequently for work and to volunteer. But being a wheelchair-bound passenger means that he's had to get used to certain processes.
I'll need to inform the airline earlier because it gives them ample notice for them to inform the ground staff as well. For example, the weight of the wheelchair that I'll be bringing, the size of the wheelchair, the dimensions, and what kind of needs do I have.
The process for travellers with disabilities is the same, whether they're tourists or residents, but limited manpower could pose a challenge.
In Singapore, we go through like 1,500 to 1,700 passengers daily, but we don't have that amount of people because we use up equipments and things like that.
To cope with the number of visitors with special needs, the staff at SETS have had to get creative. This e-caddy, for instance, can ferry 3 people out of the plane at once. Changi Airport has also deployed new technology to ease such visitors through immigration. 4 people can go through these special assistance lanes at one time. They are also wide enough for wheelchair users to pass through.
Besides giving this group of passengers a sense of autonomy, these options enables a faster, stress-free and more seamless airport journey. CAG is currently working very closely with ICA and target to implement across all 4 terminals of these special assistance lanes by the first half of next year.
The airport is not the only place trying to be more inclusive. Newer tourist attractions like Gardens by the Bay can accommodate wheelchairs and strollers. According to a government master plan, around 79% of Singapore's public buildings have achieved basic accessibility. Still, more can be done.
The old buildings in heritage districts like Chinatown are cramped and narrow, and to reach certain shops and toilets, you have to go up and down stairs like this. The walkways in front of shops aren't very wide either and have multiple level changes. Along the way, you might also have to dodge certain obstacles.
But we could be on the path to change.
Hi Malika.
Hi Sherry.
Nice to meet you.
Malika Joshi is a master's student studying architectural conservation. Here at NUS Arc Lab, she's learning how to balance accessibility and preservation.
Actually, when I started this project, so I was thinking to install lifts or maybe staircase lifts or maybe platform lift. But then I realized that if I put lift here, then it will not be accessible to that part of the building because we don't have same number of floors in both of the buildings. Then another one was that wall. And but then also the challenge was because this wall is the original building one, so moreover we cannot touch it because from the conservation perspective.
She now plans to install lifts at the back of the shop house, but getting there could be a challenge. For one, the door is just under 850 millimeters wide, which is the minimum width required for wheelchairs to pass through.
Maybe we can provide stair lift or maybe we can provide ramps, but we have to look how we have to provide it because the space is very narrow.
We are trying to consolidate all this information and then provide to the relevant authorities saying that what can be done and how can we make in future these 7,200 historic buildings in Singapore more accessible.
To encourage the owners of old units to install wheelchair-friendly features, the Building and Construction Authority has set up a fund. It co-sponsors up to 80% of the construction cost of basic accessibility features. That includes lifts and ramps, like those at the National Museum of Singapore's entrance.
So while working with our architect partners, RSP architects, planners and engineers, they have made a very conscious effort to ensure that we retain the neoclassical features of the space.
It's also trying to make this a more welcoming place for visitors with autism. They can pick up sensory bags which contain ear defenders, toys, and maps.
These are the quiet corners that you will find inside.
The map will also lead them to the museum's quiet room.
The room is designed to exude a soothing, dreamlike feel. It's shaped like a womb and it's got an alcove for children to retreat to. They can also hug these geometric-shaped pillows, and if they like, they can also change the color of the light.
It means visitors like art lover Noah Tan will have a safe space to retreat to when the crowds get too overwhelming.
Last time I did not bring him, to places like museum because
he needs to actually lower his volume because he speaks quite a loud voice, and then he cannot run about, and also cannot touch things. So a lot of restrictions. So sometimes it make him very anxious and very stressful for him.
Beyond infrastructure and programming, SG Enable, which advocates for people with disabilities in Singapore, urges those working in public spaces to remain nimble.
Where are you going to alight it?
It conducts customer inclusion training for frontline staff, including those working in public transport and malls.
Everything actually just boils down to the training of the staff. So how do we encourage staff to be more aware of the needs of persons with disabilities, and also through experiential learning for them to be more comfortable when they see that there are persons with disabilities that might need assistance.
The agency is also encouraging people to have open conversations with those with disabilities to make sure all visitors feel even more welcome here.